Welcome to episode 6 of Josh and Reid Are Parents. They have their first guest on the pod today. They talk about raising kids with purpose and resilience in a difficult and uncertain world. They're pretty proud of this one. Tell your friends to listen.
Guys, welcome back. We are back, episode 6 of Josh and Reid Are Parents. I'm Josh.
I'm Reid.
And we're parents. We are parents. Woo. We are parents. Reid, what a day. What a day for the pod.
Big day in Josh and Reid Are Parents world. We had our first guest on the podcast today, which we'll get to in just a second. Big time things happening. It was a really exciting conversation. Our guest is somebody that if you are in and around the Lipscomb community, you know this person, and we would assume you love this person because everybody does. Melanie Grogan is our guest today, and she absolutely crushed it. We had an amazing conversation about parenting, about how rewarding and beautiful and hard and all the things parenting is and will forever be, because that's what parenting is. And so get into it. Dive into the podcast. Let us know what you think about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. We're not going to put buttons up. We're not doing that stuff. But get on the social media. Follow us on there. Instagram is our number one platform for that. We have a YouTube page that's just running amok over there, getting crazy. Follow along and get into today's conversation. It's gonna be really good.
Hey guys, we are so excited about our episode today, and because we have Melanie Grogan as our first podcast guest. We're so excited. Melanie is the Spiritual Formation Director at Lipscomb Academy. She's been there for 8 years doing that. She's also a pediatric nurse and has been married to her husband, Eric, for 28 years. She's a mom to 4 amazing kids ranging from 15 to 25 years old. Reid and I have both worked with her at Lipscomb. We count her as a dear friend, as a mentor, and we're thrilled to have her as our first guest. Welcome, Melanie.
Yay,
welcome.
Melanie!
Yay. I'm so excited to be here with you two.
We are
so pumped.
We are so pumped and thankful for you taking time out of your morning to join us. So Josh said you've got kids from 15 to 25. Will you introduce your kids and just kind of talk to us about what parenting is in a very the broadest stroke possible, parenting as Melanie?
Okay, wow. No small feat there. So
Exactly.
We have 4 children. I hope I do this justice. Here we go.
Yeah.
Elizabeth is almost 25 years old. She's finishing up physical therapy school. So she's our eldest. She has had to show us the most grace as we figured things out. And now she sits at a place where she's like, seriously? The youngest gets away with that? I never got to do that.
Course,
so that kind of sums up Elizabeth. Yes. She's great. And then Will is our oldest son. He is 22, just graduated from college, headed out to do mission work and a gap year with hopes of going to medical school next year. And then Kate is finishing her freshman year in college. And I guess she actually technically already finished it last week. So now she's a sophomore and just setting her sights on what she wants to do. Had to grow up a lot in the last year, moving away. And then Max is finishing up his freshman year in high school. So he is the caboose. He's the classic 4th kid. He keeps us laughing, and we have to continually remind ourselves to think about where is Max and what does he need?
Yeah.
Sweet Max.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's amazing.
The type of person that Melanie is, this shirt I'm wearing is from one of my favorite Nashville establishments. And I'd moved from Nashville in 2020, and Baja posted that they were making these amazing T-shirts. And I obviously didn't live in Nashville anymore, and I couldn't get one. And I posted on my Instagram kind of like, I just 100% joking, like if anybody wants to send me one of these T-shirts, I would wear it all the time. Like I'm obsessed with Bob Burrito. I miss that place. And we had gotten to Texas, and friends had a daughter at college there. I just got a thumbs up bubble. And and they showed up like, here's your T-shirt. And I was like, oh my goodness. Melanie sent me the actual T-shirt. That's amazing. And so Melanie is somebody that goes above and beyond and is so thoughtful and does things like sending a T-shirt to somebody that lives 13 hours away through other people just because she saw an Instagram post. And so that's
well, I actually would explain the other side of that would be you must not hang around Enneagram 2 people very often, but
Right.
you threw out a need in front of the world, and I felt like I needed to help you. So there's that, and I'm kidding. I loved it. Baja feels like an extension of our kitchen, so I felt like, of course, I need to get you a shirt. And the other thing I would say about that, Reid, is, where I am in parenting with our kids, they're older, and you become so deeply grateful for the people who have impacted your child in different ways. And so your fingerprints are on Kate's heart. I mean, you had an impact on her, and I will forever be grateful. So you better believe it. If you post something, I'm going to figure out how I can help you.
Thank you. Yeah. Coaching Kate in basketball was amazing. I remember she came as a freshman and was like, she doesn't act like a freshman. What's going on there? She's like totally like self-assured, self-aware, confident, and capable, not like fake confident. Like she's actually like in this different realm of like, there's something, not even just basketball wise, but even just like her personality and who she is. And so and so that's something that as we get in the podcast, I'm interested in like how y'all's thinking around building identity in your kids and loving them into being, and however you want to frame that question. Because I've been so struck by that over the years. I'm like, I hope that when Henry is going into his freshman year of high school, that he's stepping into somewhere knowing like who he is, that he's loved, and that he has that deepest possible connection to feel confident.
And I think that's one of the things. I'm sorry, Melanie. I'll let you talk. I promise, as our guest, I promise I'll let you speak. One of the things I know about the fact that when we worked with you was a while ago. Reid was there a little bit more recently than I was, but we knew your kids a little bit younger than they are now, and so just us knowing and understanding your kids from that direction, and like the fact that they've grown up and they're all either in their teenage years or they're past their teenage years. Yeah, I'd love to know a little bit about like how you guys approached like how to make them into people, because that's kind of what we're really searching for right now.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big question. I will give the disclaimer from the very beginning. We have not done everything correctly. This is not, hey, let me tell you what we did and then follow suit. Yeah. It's more happy to share our experiences and happy to share the vision that we hold, and some things that may have been helpful to help us get there. I think I would also have to give the disclaimer. My kids would want me to say they are not perfect by a long shot. We are a broken family that sits at the feet of Jesus and counts on him to be who he says he is, and seek, as a family, we try to seek his presence, his grace, his mercy, and reflect his love. And that sounds cliche, I guess, but it is at the root of our family. It's who we are. And so we've done a few things maybe right and a lot of things wrong. And he has filled in the gaps in big ways, and very grateful for the people that have come alongside us. I think that's such an important piece of parenting is community that surrounds you so that they can fill the gaps.
Yeah.
Incredibly grateful for the people that have touched our kids' lives.
Right. Melanie, tell us this. Like, I know that, and that's how me and Reid often try to approach the people that listen here, is not like we have like some sort of like parenting expertise, but mostly that we're kind of like fellow travelers trying to figure this out as we walk through some of this stuff. Yeah. And one of the things I would love to know about is like, do you and Eric, like, do you have like these things that really matter to you, like as you're trying to present to your kids, or is it kind of just like each kid needs something really, really different? Like, how has that been? Like, this is how we parent our kids. Do you guys have thoughts on that?
Well, we don't have like a 3-ring binder that we reference often, but we definitely, I think we have to parent with the end goal in sight. Otherwise, you get so wrapped up into like the day-to-day and the control piece to it. And so if I back up and I think about what is our end goal, our desire is for our children to abide with the Lord. Our desire is that they walk with him, that they lead purposeful lives, recognizing how he has equipped and gifted them. And from that they would have flourishing relationships. So do we recite that every day? No. But is it at the core of our decisions? And it does shape our decisions on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. And that's our heart for them. And then the in-between, Reid, you asked the question, what is parenting like with that age group? And I would say it's a roller coaster, like a lot of ups, a lot of downs. moments of being terrified and moments of just pure joy and delight. So it's a mix.
You did, and I don't know if you're still doing the social emotional learning things that are connected with, and then like rooted. Maybe they're built on top of the rooting of the gospel, and the way that it's couched at Lipscomb. And I'm just wondering how much of that kind of sprung out of the way that y'all were working to build identity in your kids, and especially for like as they enter into the teenage years and prepare for I don't know, it feels like a battle for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. It has shaped, I would say vice versa. Mm-hmm. I think my experience at home and raising children has impacted what I do professionally. Yeah. And the flip is true as well. And that because of what I do at school, it has shaped how I parent. So that all goes back to the idea of we have a choice. We can either focus on the outside and those outward behaviors and control them and put rules around them so that we get those outward behaviors that we desire, or we can take it one step further and help our children and also ourselves understand who we were created to be. And so that goes back to looking at the nature of God and understanding who he is, who he claims to be, and who he promises to be. And that tells me who I am. And as I think about reflecting him, which is what I'm created to do as an image bearer, that shows up in the way that I treat, and love the Lord, treat myself, and the way that I treat and interact with other people. So that is at the core of all of it.
Yeah. So in your parenting, then I guess it's like, because I'm struggling with, even as having a 6-year-old, of like, how do I release this like desire to white knuckle, want to control, right? Like you're saying, the outward behaviors or the day-to-day things. And on some level, for a 6-year-old, you need to do that because he can't organize his own life, right? Like there is a piece of that. There's also like, I need to release and allow him to make choices, and then you like amplify that into teenage years. How have you guys been able to trust and release that control and allow mistakes, errors, learning, those sorts of things happen, where you don't then take it personally? Because that's something that we've been talking a lot about in our previous conversations of like, how do we do this without it becoming like, oh, my kid's behavior somehow is my fault, or good or bad, either take the credit or I take the full blame. And like, how do I differentiate from that feeling, I guess?
Oh, there's so much to that question. Like you're spot on. And it's incredibly difficult. You know, I mentioned earlier that I'm an Enneagram 2. So like I want to help people. It kills me not to help them. And so when my kids, when I see that they're struggling or I see that they've made a wrong turn, it's just my instinct to want to step in. And so I've had to do a lot of work myself on that. And I probably have rescued my kids at times when they should have suffered the natural consequences. It helps to be married to somebody who keeps that in check. And he's like, no, let him fail. It's great. And he's right. He's right. I think about even Elizabeth when she first learned to drive, and that was before Life 360. But I was trying to I was watching her on my phone, I guess, through Find My iPhone, and watching her drive down Franklin Road. And I saw she was going to somewhere in Brentwood, and I watched her make a wrong turn. And my instinct was to call her, but I'm like, I can't call her because she's not supposed to answer her phone when she's driving. Like I wanted to step in, and I had to just take a deep breath and sit back and be like, okay, I have trained her to make independent decisions, and I want her to be able to get out of situations and to think critically and to assert herself and use her voice and use what God has gifted her with. And I'm going to have to trust that process. And so I think the trust piece is huge. And that reminds me of a story with our youngest. When he was a newborn, he had a softened airway. We actually didn't know that his airway had not completely formed, I guess is the best way to say it. So he had one incident where he had this massive spit up, and this airway kind of collapsed, and we had to call 911. It was traumatic. We did the first steps of resuscitation. It was terrifying. Sure. And so we go to the emergency room. We are discharged. They're like, we can't figure out what's wrong, but we they watched him feed. They're like, I think he's going to be fine, which is reassuring. And sent us home, and we were sitting around the living room. My mom was there with us because we had all the kids were there, and she said, I guess we need to set up a schedule. Like, who is going to stay awake with this newborn all night long to keep an eye on him? And I thought about it. We kind of started talking about what that schedule would look like. And then I finally just said, I kind of, I'm sure I was emotional about it because I'd had a baby 2 weeks before that. But I just said, I can't do this. I can't live my life feeling like I have to step in and be there or disaster will ensue. Right. And so I remember placing Max in the bassinet that night. And it can make me cry just thinking about it. I remember just saying, okay, Lord, you've got him. Like, would you wake me up if he needs something? If whatever it is, would you put that in me through your spirit? And if not, Lord, I'll trust you. And we did, and things were fine. But that moment has taught me so much. I think about it the same, just told my son goodbye for a month-long mission trip where I'm worried about him, right? I'm worried and prayerful about his safety. And I hope he has his passport, right? I mean, I hope he has all the things he needs, but he's 22, and I have to go back to that same moment of,
wow,
I could control this, I could wear him out, but is that really helping him to reach that goal that I want? And so if it's not, then I have to sit back and say, I trust you.
Right. Melanie, as you talk about that moment, I can imagine how hard and how like scary that moment was. And then also, as you named, there's like multiple moments you had to do that throughout their lives, right? And you're still continuing to do that.
Totally.
Right? This idea of like, I have to like kind of let this go here. And it's terrifying, right? It's overwhelming. A lot of times when like me as a counselor and Reid as a minister, as we talk to parents, like teenage years are this like kind of like really scary, like wait till they're teenagers type thing, right? What I'm interested in is you think about like those hard moments, those scary moments you had to trust, specifically around the teen years. What was like really, really cool about being a parent of teenagers? What was great? What's really fun? And what's really hard? Like, what is like something that you did not really understand going into it? Do you know how to think through that?
I don't think we have time for all the things I didn't understand.
Like, we're going to like an hour and a half, 2 hours in this.
No, I've always been someone who loved babies. I told somebody the other day, I'm like, hey, when we're together in heaven, eternity, look for me. I'll be in the nursery taking care of the babies. Like, I love babies. I couldn't wait to have babies and small children. And I remember almost holding fear towards those teenage years, thinking like, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. Like, I don't know. And those things just kind of happen. You blink and you've got a teenager. And I can remember watching and walking with Elizabeth as she traversed those teenage years and realizing, oh, wow, like this is fun. Like I like them. Like I love them and I like them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is, it's fun to think about adding that layer, that dimension to your relationship with your kids of you're a cool kid and I like being around you. Mm-hmm. So that's great, except for when they grow horns and they are those angry, volatile teenagers. No, I'm kidding. I think that's a stereotype that's not always true. But sure. But teenage years are tough. I mean, they're going through so much. Their hormones are crazy. Their bodies are changing. They're experiencing strong emotions. They don't know what to do with them. Yeah. I think the pressures that the world puts on them, in addition to things that they are pursuing and goals that they've set for themselves, it's a lot. Yeah. And so developing and fostering that compassion for where they are and trying to think about their perspective going through the teenage years has changed my response to them. Yeah. And so it has required me to step in and be like, I wonder what Will's feeling as he heads out of the country today. Or I wonder what Max is feeling like because he's the only one that doesn't drive in the family yet, right? So like, what would it be like to be? You have to step in and think about and anticipate what they might be feeling. And that allows me or gives me insight that allows me to respond more appropriately, I hope. Yeah. Certainly don't do it right all the time. And I take the bait. Sometimes I think teenagers are seeking boundaries. They're seeking reactions. Yeah. And underneath all of that, they want to feel safe. Yeah. And so there are times when I won't mention any names, but at any time, any of them might have tried to elicit a response and engage, and I have taken bait and gotten hooked, and then we just get into that back and forth. And at the end of the day, that's not helpful, because I end up frustrated and exasperated, and I'm not proud of how I've spoken to them or what I've said or decisions that I've made. And it just, it just feels icky at the end of that. And they don't feel good about it either.
Sure.
And so it requires, relationships are two-sided. Mm-hmm. So to put all the pressure on the teenager and say that they should have their act together and I've got my act together all the time, that's believing a lie and not being honest with ourselves about our own responsibility in it. So I would say the teenage years have required me to look inward and do some hard work and discipline myself. And at times it would be a lot easier not to do that and just laugh at them and take out my own emotion at them. So I think it's less about who they are and more about navigating and building and maintaining relationships between a parent and a teenager through those years, if that makes sense.
Oh man, it makes so much sense. It's what I heard you saying is that it takes a lot of humility and it takes a lot of curiosity. Yeah. And it a lot of times that fear makes it easier to just be angry or just be mean. Right? It's way easier. That's an easier response in the moment, but it doesn't create good connections with kids. It doesn't help them do stuff. It doesn't help them think through what's happening next. It doesn't help them make better choices. Yeah. Right. Which is what I hear you saying. I'm just trying so hard to figure out where are they, instead of how am I seeing the situation and why don't they see it my way? You're saying I got to figure out how they're viewing this, because however crazy or hormonal it is, I got to see what they're seeing a little bit so I can help, which is so it's exactly right.
Yeah. When I think about Jesus and how he ministered to people, obviously he's fully God, fully man. He saw people and he knew what was in their hearts. Yeah. And so we don't have that. But I do think when we attempt to reflect him and to be like him and follow his example, there's a lot there. And so the temptation is to react to what we see on the outside. And so if you see the angry outburst by a teenager, or you see the whatever it is that they present to you, the temptation is to react and respond to that. And I think there's wisdom in trying to get underneath what you see and going there. And I have not done it right every time, but I think it looks like if they have an angry outburst, the temptation is to put rules around, you can't do that. And now that you did that, and you're heaping coals, right? That isn't helpful, rather than being hey, what's underneath all that? Mm-hmm. And sometimes that catches them off guard, right? Because that's really what they want, is to be seen. Yeah. So in that moment, if you say, hey, what's going on inside? It just levels the playing field. And then you have this rich conversation that can bring good fruit. Yeah. And you realize you don't even have to put the rules and the boundaries. And by no means is our home run without consequences or rules or boundaries. Sure. We do have those. And we, enforce them when they're not respected. Yeah. But I think the temptation is to lead with rules instead of leading with relationship.
Yeah. That reminds me of what we've been talking about with our last episode, talking about what we're calling grace-filled parenting. And we use the image from Luke 15, the end of Luke 15, with the man who has two sons. And with hearing you kind of talk, I don't know why I didn't think of this last time, but it just struck me that the way I was trying to connect with it last time was that the goal is to grow and become the dad who's meeting both children outside the party. But I think what I'm becoming aware of is that sometimes as the parent, it's probably more that I'm the older brother that's standing outside the party, and God still has to come to me and go hey, you need to come to the party and have a conversation. There's something else going on underneath this. There's something worth celebrating even in this moment when you feel forgotten or you're not respected or whatever their list of things, that reasons why you might be offended by what's happening. And instead, God steps out of the party that's happening, meets us where we are, and empowers us to then step into the grace. And so I'm just wondering about grace-filled parenting, what that phrase might strike in you, if anything, because it's something I'm still, thinking a lot about since our last conversation.
Wow. I love that term, grace-filled parenting. And I think it starts with recognizing the grace that we all receive.
Yeah.
And so, being a parent doesn't mean you're better than your child or more important. We're all created as image bearers. And so for me to honor that in my kids is just as important in me honoring that in my coworkers or in a stranger at Chick-fil-A, right? Like, I mean, there's that. So recognizing first what's going on vertically between me and the Lord is where it starts. Yeah. And then from that, it impacts how I parent. And so grace-filled parenting to me is not always handing them what they deserve. And this is it's so hard to talk about. I'm probably going to make a mess of this because I don't think that means without consequences, right? I mean, the father in Luke 15, he didn't go rescue the son who squandered the money, right? He let the consequences happen, but he was a steadfast presence that desired relationship and desired welcoming that son back. And so consequences are going to happen. And often I think the consequences are what happens from their choices naturally. And I mean, ultimately that's what we want, right? Because they're only in our home for a couple of decades, right? Give or take a few years. I mean, they're only there. And at the end, we want these kids to morph into adults who seek the Lord and who make decisions and learn from their mistakes and accept consequences. Like that's where we're going. So we've got to get there and not have all these rules around them and just hope all of a sudden they wake up and then turn out that way, right? So the natural consequences I think are extremely important. The grace part comes in when we say, hey, I know you made this decision and I can see that it didn't turn out the way you wanted. And I'm sorry you're hurting. And I know you've got some wounds from this, but let me remind you who you are. Your decisions don't define you. You're defined because you belong to the Lord, and it's a joy to be your mom. And I love you, and you're going to make me cry. I'm just pretending. I mean, I've said these words like, I love you, and I forgive you, and I forgive you because we're forgiven as well. And so what does this look like to restore then? Yeah. Whether it's relationship damage or wherever the restoration needs to happen, what does that look like? And then walking through them with that part as well. I think so often people think grace-filled parenting means, just no accountability. And I think quite the opposite. There is accountability, but knowing you're loved and your identity is not taken because of that decision or that choice is crucial.
Man, it's some of the things that we've been trying to suss through too. Like Melanie, that was incredibly beautiful. Yeah. The thing that we have found to be true, and like as we approach this, is we found that the father inside of that story never leads with fear. Like he trusts and even knows that the choices that the son will make will not be good, and yet still knows he has to make those choices. Allows him to make them. And then in the moments where he arrives back and he in all the different things, there's never fear response. There's never defensiveness, right? It's always leading with intentional love. And then the idea around I know who you are. He knows that they are image bearers of the Lord, right? He knows that about them. And sometimes our kids, especially teenagers that are so struggling with identity and who they are and how they look and how people are perceiving them, don't know who they are. And us reminding them, I know who you are. I know that you have the image of the Lord embedded inside of you. That is massively significant to them to help reorient them towards you know who I am? Because I'm searching. I'm not sure. Yeah. And I love that. I'm interested in connecting that thought with the parents and the students that you work with at Lipscomb and in other places that you work, because I know that you're really attuned to those students and kind of their needs. And I wonder if you've seen changes or just differences over the last 4 or 5 years, especially since the pandemic and all of that. Do you see places where parents are particularly struggling, places where they need more support, places where they're not sure what to do? Is that something that you recognize in your work?
Absolutely. I would say at the very beginning, I'm also a parent, right, that has experienced the pandemic. Yeah. So I'm not speaking the others and they're experiencing it. It's us. Yeah. It's all of us. And so when I think about society since the pandemic, I see a society that has become so polarized that because of fear, I think the scarcity mindset kicked in, right? And so there's fear of protection, there's fear of I have to take control, and there's this confidence that comes with us speaking what we're entitled to. And I think it affects all of us. I have noticed it in my own self where I've had to back up and be like, whoa, where did that, like, is that who I am? Right. Is that who I want to be? So I think when I think about our students, remembering that I have a student there, I have seen, oh, this is good. You're going to have to edit this. I've seen a population of people who feel like their opinion is the only way and it's the right way, and no consideration for how my decisions or my stance might impact you. So there's just less tolerance for people. There is a fear-based response, a defensive posture, where I think parents feel like we have to protect our kids. And sometimes that means that desire kicks in and we want to protect them from any kind of accountability or consequence. And it makes me want to do a second check, right? Because what is our end goal? Going back to what is it that we want to produce in our kids? And I see a decreased respect for authority. And I'm not sure I would even say that I don't know that as adults that we've done a good job displaying who we are and respecting other people to deserve that respect as any type of authority figure, if that makes sense. I think we've seen a lot of abuse. I think we have seen a lot of authority figures disappoint us wherever you are politically, wherever you are, like just because we're human, right? And so I heard a student yesterday say, well, I'm not going to respect a teacher if they're not going to respect me, which I'm not sure I would have heard 5 years ago. And, in one sense, I'm grateful that the student shared with me how they felt. And I'm like, okay, so what I hear underneath that is you might feel like your voice doesn't always matter. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, okay. So, I think as adults, we've got to think about that. Like, how are we treating other people? Is that because of the stress from the pandemic? Is that because of the fear that we now carry for whatever reason that transfers to other areas in life? How are we demonstrating what we desire? And so authority in general, whether it's an adult or whether it's a 14-year-old in a school setting or out in a youth group, wherever, I think all of us are struggling with authority.
Yeah. Man, I agree with that. I don't know, Reid, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautifully said. I'm struck by to kind of like round it out by how the initial question I was asking was about like identity in your own kids and forming and shaping them in a way that is rooted in love and rooted in grace. And it's interesting to me that those things created, and my experience is really with just one of your kids in coaching, so it's a different type dynamic, but like a true, like I think there's this like you're saying, like this desire to buck the system in some way. And it's not just with kids, they're watching adults do it. And they're like, well, I guess that's normal. So I'm just going to buck the whole system. And that's what's going to produce something new or something better. And maybe it's even more than just buck the system. Maybe it's just like, you can't, like, it's like all individual even, I don't know. And so it's so interesting to me that like the things that I still think about, like not just with your kids, but with other kids that I've coached and taught and now ministered to, where it's like, okay, they genuinely know who they are. It's almost always connected to the fact that their parents have created a relationship that is like runs on two rails at the same time. One being you are fully capable and I trust you. And the other being when you screw up, I'm going to love you. And those two rails run in that student's heart all the time. and they know that like it's not going to like break and fall out from underneath them. And so in that, like it's interesting that like for those students there is like more of a respect for authority because I think they understand like, or they've witnessed more. Maybe I don't understand. They've witnessed more of the fact that the adults in their life are creating those two rails for them to run on and feel that safety and security you were pointing to. And then I'm also wondering in ministry or in counseling or in teaching and in spiritual formation, like what does it look like to then create communities where we might be able to create those rails for our kids? And is that even possible? And that's all like, kind of meta stuff, but that's how my brain kind of runs. And so I'm thankful for the way that you captured that without it. Cause it's so interesting because it's easy to like almost want to turn to the, I don't know. Like even in the story of the student yesterday, like it was never like you being like, oh, wow, that was really dumb. You know what I mean? That like that could have happened. Like there's a world in which that's the response that student's getting, and instead you're trying to create that ability to be like tell me more about what's going on underneath because that matters too. So yeah, that was a lot.
I think I love that. I love the picture of the train tracks of having two and then having some room in between there. I love that picture because I think that goes back to earlier when I said rules without relationship lead to rebellion. And so I think our instinct, and I think we blame a lot on the pandemic. I'm not sure, but I think we were, and I don't want to get into the politics of COVID and all those things, but sure. The world was shut down. And so we were at home and you were instructed. Boundaries were placed around you, whether you liked them or not, whether you desired to respect them or whether you didn't want that. Like the world shut down for a short time. And I think that has potentially impacted how we view boundaries. And so we're really just fighting against what we experienced in 2020. And that has just carried over. And so I think the key is relationship. When the relationship goes alongside the rules, kids are not going to be like, oh, I understand your rule now. And so, but they feel safe and they feel seen and they feel like they can disagree and still respect authority and still obey and still stay within the boundaries. And I think because of the polarization that's happened because of COVID, I feel like a lot of us tend to think we can only feel one thing. And so feeling disagreement is all I can feel rather than I can disagree and I can love, or I can not feel respected and still show respect, right? I think this idea that we have to choose one or the other. And I think the Lord created us intentionally to hold more than one emotion at a time. Wow. And so it's going to take some work. I think just helping, realizing it myself and modeling it, catching myself when I don't, and then helping to create systems that have both relationships and boundaries or norms for community. I guess you could call it rules, but that just sounds so much different. So I think we have to do something there. And I think also social media, TikTok, all of the things that are part of our teenagers' worlds, I think are not innately evil. And I think we have to be really careful how we position ourselves with those means, methods, whatever, in that that's their reality. Like they don't know a world without it.
Sure.
And being attuned to how that's impacted their development in attention span in a society that says, watch what you want. And when you're tired of that, you swipe, right? Or you scroll. I think about our family that could be, no longer are we gathered in the same room watching the same show or a movie. It's not uncommon for everyone to be watching Netflix on their own device, what they want. And if you want this food, if you want Asian and your sibling wants Mexican food, then you Uber Eats two different ones, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just a world where what you want, you can have And that's the reality of where we are. We have to both acknowledge it and be aware of the impact of it and watch that as well. So I think with our kids, it's an impacted attention span. I think the idea of what I want now, and when I don't want it anymore, I want something different. We have to pay attention to that too. And I think once again, that goes back to what am I modeling with that? I don't know that as adults, we're much different.
Right.
What's the first thing I do when I'm bored for a hot second is grab my phone and right. I mean, it's all of us.
Yes.
And I think there's some real psychological, mental, spiritual, and certainly social emotional implications that have come from where we are right now with those resources.
Yeah. One of the things, I think our audience will be able to hear why we chose Melanie to be our first guest is because, Melanie, not only do you have like these incredibly like beautiful thoughts, but you can communicate them so well. And it's just why you're so good at helping students, I think, work through some of these things. We knew that if we got you on, we asked you questions, you would give us like incredible things because you did that. And we're really, really thankful for that. So it feels also that there's like 17 more hours of stuff I want to talk to you about and ask you about. So I don't know, like at some point we'll probably have you back on and work through some of that. You're a very busy woman, so I don't know if this is exactly what you need to be doing multiple times, but like we're going to try anyway. We're going to pursue
I love hanging out with y'all. I would do this any day.
Okay.
And I would add that I have watched people do this really well. So I'm learning. I mean, that's where my work comes in is spending time reading and soaking in and taking notes on people that do this well and gleaning from them.
Right.
I have a lot of good role models.
Well, Reid and I talked about how you're one of ours. That's why we brought you on. And so we're thankful for it. Reid, that's a pretty good podcast, but it's a pretty good one.
Pretty good one. Look at us go.
Man. That's one of our better ones, I think.
I think it's, by far the best.
By far the best. Thanks for listening, guys. We will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Melanie.
Bye.
Bye.